All right, bear with me while I read this test. The Miracle Worker Final Test. Kate discovers Helen is blind by watching Helen try to reach for a toy, snapping her fingers at Helen's eyes, showing Helen her dog Belle, or moving slowly around Helen's crib. Who is Helen Keller's primary caregiver before Annie Sullivan arrives? Captain Keller, Kate Keller, Aunt Ev, or Martha? Which character unwillingly surrenders buttons so Helen's doll can have eyes? Percy, Martha, Aunt Ev, or Kate? Identify which character said the following. Language is to the mind more than light is to the eye. Kate, Captain Keller, Annie, James, or Aunt Ev? Identify which character said the following. I don't think Helen's worst handicap is deafness or blindness. It's your love and pity. Kate, Captain Keller, Annie, James, or Aunt Ev? Identify which character said the following. She'll live up to just what you demand of her and no more. Kate, Captain Keller, Annie, James, or Aunt Ev? Identify which character said the following. She spells in her sleep. Those 5 fingers know that hand aches to speak out. Kate, Captain Keller, Annie, James, or Aunt Ev? Identify which character said the following. Don't you know everything you forgot when you forgot your mother? I'm sorry. Don't you know everything you forgot when you forgot my mother? Kate, Captain Keller, Annie, James, or Aunt Ev? Identify which character said the following. We catch our flies with honey. I'm afraid we haven't the heart for much else. Kate, Captain Keller, Annie, James, or Aunt Ev? Identify which character said the following. The more I think, the more certain I am that obedience is the gateway through which knowledge enters the mind of the child. Kate, Captain Keller, Annie, James, or Aunt Ev? Identify which character said the following. Great improvement. Now we have 2 of them to look after. Kate, Captain Keller, Annie, James, or Aunt F? Which character grew up in an asylum and was once blind? Helen, Kate, Annie, or Keller? When Helen pokes her fingers inside Percy's mouth, she's trying to find a lost key, hurt him for not sharing his scissors, figure out what he's doing when he talks, or tell him she's hungry. Who was Annie's teacher at the Perkins Institute? Anagnos, Viney, or Mr. Perkins? What happens after Helen tips over Mildred's cradle? Helen cries because she knows Mildred is frightened. Kate shakes Helen to show her what she has done wrong. Captain Keller says Helen should be confined. Mildred is killed from the force of the blow. What action of Helen's gave Kate her first bit of hope when Helen said the word mama, excused herself from the table, ate with a spoon, said that she liked Annie, or folded her napkin after a meal? What is Captain Keller's profession? Doctor, teacher, newspaper editor, or lawyer? How does Annie feel as she watches Helen remove the key from her mouth at the end of Act 1? Challenged to stay and teach her, angry at Helen's behavior, convinced that James took the key, doubtful about staying. Who is Annie's little brother who died? Jimmy, James Keller, or Percy? Which character serves as a servant in the Keller household? Martha, Viney, Aunt Ev, or Percy's mother? Which character has a complex relationship with their father due to feelings of inadequacy? Helen Keller, Annie Sullivan, James Keller, or Percy. Katie and Captain Keller put up with Helen's eating behavior because they want her to get enough to eat. She's physically unable of holding her spoon in her disfigured hand. The family doesn't eat at the same time she does. Family members can talk to each other if they aren't focused on controlling Helen. Annie's questions about what Captain Keller will do when he's under the strawberries, dead, is intended to make him think about the long term effect of spoiling Helen, realize that Helen needs as much pity as possible, write a will in case he should die before Helen grows up, be grateful that he's in good health. Captain Keller's telling Kate to fire Annie suggests that he is too kind hearted to do it himself, aware that Kate is the true boss of the family, totally scared for Annie, too busy to be bothered with home matters. Annie tells the Kellers that for her to succeed with Helen, Helen must be confined to her bedroom, taken to a special school, completely dependent on Annie, completely independent of Annie. The meaning of the play's title is revealed in the miracle of Captain Keller's controlling his temper, Helen's associated words with their meanings, Annie's eyes being healed, James's courage in talking back to his father. What is the last phrase that Annie spells to Helen in the play? Water, I love sign language, I love Helen, or more time? James says that Helen's skill at spelling letters into Annie's hand indicates that Helen is like a monkey who imitates everything, has already learned sign language, is very intelligent, is ticklish. What is Helen Keller's primary disability in the play? She's partially blind, she cannot speak, she is both deaf and blind, she has limited mobility. Where does Annie Sullivan come from? Perkins Institute for the Blind, Boston General Hospital, New York School for the Deaf, Alabama State School. What word does Helen first learn to spell? Mother, doll, food, or water? What is Annie Sullivan's background? She was born wealthy, she was previously a teacher, she was once partially blind herself, she grew up in a loving family. What is the breakthrough moment in teaching Helen? Reading Braille, sign language, the dinner table scene, or the water pump scene? How does Helen initially communicate before Annie arrives? Simple hand gestures, writing, speaking slowly, or sign language? What is Captain Keller's initial attitude toward Annie? Supportive, skeptical and dismissive, enthusiastic, or indifferent? What object does Annie give Helen that becomes significant? A book, a doll, a bell, a brush? How does Annie discipline Helen initially? Timeouts, verbal reprimands, physical restraint, taking away privileges. What is the setting of the play? Boston, Massachusetts, Tuscumbia, Alabama, New York City, or Philadelphia? What is the time period of the play? The 1880s, 1930s, 1960s, or 1860s? At the end of the garden house scene between the Kellers and Annie, Kate expresses the opinion that Annie is only staying with the Kellers because she needs the money, beginning to feel affection for Helen even though Annie denies it, not telling the truth about her childhood in the poorhouse, enjoying having arguments with Captain Keller. What happens to Annie's brother and her backstory? He becomes a teacher, he moves away, he dies at the institute, or he recovers from illness. What does Annie discover about Helen's previous behavior? She was deliberately defiant, she was completely helpless, she had been spoiled by her family, she was naturally aggressive. What physical challenge does Annie face throughout the play? weak eyesight, hearing loss, chronic pain, speech impediment. What is the symbolic significance of water in the play? Cleansing, language and understanding, punishment, or freedom? Helen's sign for her mother was weeping, touching her cheek, animal like noises, waving her arms in a circle, placing her hands over her heart. Annie will not let Captain Keller take her suitcase because she wants to show him she is a capable woman who does not need help. She has something in it for Helen. She does not allow others to touch her things. She is frightened of him. She thinks it's too heavy for him. Captain Keller wants to fire Annie because he feels Annie is not respectful of Kate, not helping Helen, and failed to show him the proper respect, from a poor background, not smart enough for the job, not respectful of Helen. Because people pity Helen, they A. Give her candy, B. Let her do whatever she wants, C. Do not expect her to behave like other children, D. All of the above, E. Both B and C. According to Annie, the primary sin in life is cruelty to the handicapped, having no expectations for the handicapped, giving up, wasting one's time, treating others with disrespect. What effect did the battle in the breakfast room have on the captain? Captain Keller finished his breakfast quickly. Captain Keller fired Annie. Captain Keller was insulted by Annie. Captain Keller punished Helen. After 2 weeks alone with Helen, Annie was disturbed because Helen had not formed any interest in what Annie was trying to teach her. Helen still behaved in an animal like way. Helen told Annie she hates her. Helen's thinking skills had gone down. Helen did not grasp the concept of language and word meanings. When Helen returns to the Keller house, she drops her napkin at the dinner table because she does not need to use it. She did not use one at the garden house. She is testing Annie. It means she is finished eating. Annie views Helen's accomplishments after returning from the garden house as better than she expected. She cannot learn any more. Good, but she needs to learn more. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Captain Keller views Helen's accomplishments after returning from the garden house as better than he expected. She cannot learn any more. Good, but she needs to learn more. Cleanliness is next to godliness. James comes into his own when he refuses to take Annie to the asylum, helps Annie save Helen, stops his father from interfering with Annie's discipline of Helen, returns the money he had stolen, argues with his father over the Battle of Vicksburg. In the last scene, Helen shows Annie that she wants her to stay by giving her a garnet ring, a doll, a key, a napkin. The character best described as isolated is Kate, Annie, Helen, James, or the captain. Helen grasps the idea of language when she recognizes the word mother, feels the dog's fur, falls from the swing, remembers the word water, asks for cake. From the outset of the play, this person felt that Helen was beyond help and such a disruption that she should be put in asylum. Annie, Kate, the captain, James, or Aunt Ev. How does the play end? Helen leaves for school, Annie departs, Helen understands language, the family moves away. What things, personal qualities, life circumstances, etc., do Helen and Annie have in common? What things are different? Make sure to mention 3 similarities and 3 differences. How did these things help and or hurt Annie's performance as Helen's teacher? List two conflicts in the play. Make sure to describe the characters involved and describe their conflict. Once you are finished, you may submit and you are done.